Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Oxnard Planning Commission for Thursday, October 17, 2024. The meeting will come to order at 6 p.m. The public may view the meeting from home on the city's website, Spectrum Channel 10, Frontier Channel 35, or on the city's YouTube website. To participate in the meeting, the public may provide comments to the Planning Commission via email at planning@oxnard.org no later than 3 p.m. on the day of the meeting, or through the city's website at oxnard.org/city-meetings, or call the Planning Division office at 805-385-7878. Additionally, those wishing to speak can dial the phone number listed at the bottom of the screen, follow the instructions to access the meeting, and press star 9 to raise your hand, indicating your intention to speak on the agenda item being discussed. Madam Secretary, can we please have the roll call?
Chair Arejo.
Present.
Vice Chair Dr. Stewart.
Present.
Commissioner Lopez.
Here.
Commissioner Nash.
Present.
Commissioner Zielsdorf. Present. Commissioner Schulke.
Present.
Commissioner Connolly is absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We will now move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Zielsdorf, will you kindly lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, Commissioner Zielsdorf. The next agenda item is C, public comments on items not on the agenda. At this time, a person may address the Planning Commission on matters within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission, including information consent items and any time not appearing on the agenda. The Planning Commission cannot take action on any item presented during public comments that is not on the agenda, and such item may only be referred to the Commission Secretary. Persons wishing to speak on public hearing items should do so at the time of the public hearing. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments for items not on the agenda?
No, Chair, there are none.
Thank you. And we'll move on to Section D, consent agenda, approval of the minutes for September 5, 2024, and September 19. If there is no objection, we can consider these items together unless there is a preference to consider these separately. And if there are no further corrections to the minutes, a motion will be in order. Vice Chair Dr. Stewart.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
It's been moved by Vice Chair Dr. Stewart to approve the consent agenda items as distributed. Is there a second?
Second by Nash.
Thank you. Any deliberation on the motion before us? Seeing and hearing none, Madam Secretary, can we have the roll call, please?
Vice Chair Dr. Stewart.
Yes.
Commissioner Nash.
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Commissioner Zielsdorf. Aye. Commissioner Schulke.
Aye.
Chair Arejo.
Aye.
This motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We'll move on to Section E, ex parte declarations for public hearing items. Please state any ex parte declarations, if any. I'll move across the dais. Commissioner Zielsdorf.
None, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Nash.
None, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dr. Lopez.
None, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dr. Stewart.
None, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Schulke.
None, thank you.
And none for myself. Thank you all. The next item on the agenda is Section F, public hearing, agenda item F1, Oxnard Sand Management Plan, Planning and Zoning Permit number 22-400-06, Coastal Development Permit. A request for a coastal development permit to implement a sand management plan for the coastal areas generally within the Oxnard Shores community. The project includes collecting wind-blown beach sand from beach access points, sidewalks, streets, and walkways, and redepositing the sand back onto the beach at 13 locations. The project is exempt from environmental review pursuant to Section 15304 of the CEQA guidelines, filed by Brian Yanez, Assistant Public Works Director, on behalf of the City of Oxnard, City Staff Joe Pearson II, Planning and Environmental Services Manager. Per Measure M, a staff presentation has been pre-recorded and the link has been posted to YouTube. Per previously approved standing rules, staff can provide a brief summary of the pre-recorded presentation in addition to other analysis at this time. Mr. Pearson.
Yes, Chair Rejo and Commissioners, just a few things to add. Just as a general explanation of what's before you today. Essentially, the city is requesting a coastal development permit to allow for the removal of sand that is blown off of the beach into the existing streets and parking lots and walkways or coastal access ways. The city has been essentially doing this work intermittently. However, pursuant to the Coastal Act and our LCP, the city is required to have a coastal development permit to do these activities. So that is the reason for the request before the commission today, which is essentially to bring into compliance the city's actions as it relates to cleanup of the sand within the streets and sidewalks and coastal access ways, and then create a plan for actually keeping those areas clear for coastal access. So prior to this meeting, the commissioners received quite a few comment letters from individuals, essentially requesting additional time to review this item. This item was presented to a community workshop back in 2022. Since then, there's been a few minor changes to the document, but is fundamentally the same. We just incorporated some additional changes as a result of comments from the Coastal Commission staff, as well as some of the changes that were recommended by the community as part of that community workshop. However, the city is requesting that this item be continued to a date certain, to the, I believe it's the December 19th meeting. So staff is requesting that we continue with the item, that we have the application or presentation from the applicant, open the public comment period, and then take any additional questions from the commission, and then at that point in time, continue it to the December 19th meeting. And then I know the applicant, Brian Yanez, and our Public Works team has a presentation as well, but I'm available if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson and Mr. Brian Yanez, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, Chair, Planning Commissioners. I'm Brian Yanez, Assistant Public Works Director. I'm representing the Public Works Department as the applicant for this coastal development permit for the sand management plan. You'll hear that sand management plan quite often tonight, so we call it the SMP. So this SMP is intended for ongoing general maintenance and to relocate and deposit windblown sand from our public use areas, streets, sidewalks, coastal access points, etc., back onto the beach. I'm going to introduce Jamie Grundon from Rincon Consultants, Inc., who will be providing a PowerPoint for you tonight. Also in our audience, we have Michael Wolf, our Public Works Director, Steve Hallett, our Assistant Public Works Director, and a Parks Manager, Brandon, oh my God, I forgot your name, Brandon, last name. So we have staff here to answer questions after the presentation, and we'll get started with the presentation. Thank you.
Do we have the PowerPoint available?
Yeah, Diego, if you could bring up the PowerPoint. There we go.
Perfect. Well, good evening. My name is Jamie Grundon with Rincon Consultants. I'm a senior biologist and have been supporting the city on this project for several years. City staff contracted Rincon Consultants to assist in the preparation of our sand management plan and coastal development permitting process for the maintenance activities performed in the city of Oxnard and within the coastal zone. The city of the city of Oxnard is committed to preserving beaches and coastal access points for recreation, public safety, and sand nourishment benefits. The city has been conducting this maintenance in the coastal zone under the existing LCP for several decades, but the development of this plan incorporates a maintenance manual, preventive measures for sensitive biological resources, which were developed in coordination with the California Coastal Commission, which included a site visit with Coastal Commission staff ecologist, the California State Lands Commission, City Community Development Department, and the City Public Works Street and Parks Division. And we ensured that the sand management plan did capture the input from those regulatory agencies, including the City Maintenance Division. Like I mentioned, we conducted a biological resources study and sand contamination study to ensure that the project did not impact any coastal resources or environmentally sensitive habitat that was identified by the Coastal Commission during our site visit. The Oxnard Shores area in the city of Oxnard, as we may all know, experienced severe wind events that result in windblown beach sand accumulating on the city streets, park amenities, and beach access points. The accumulated sand moves from the beach and those access points to the streets, sidewalks, walkways, parking lots, resulting in potentially hazardous conditions for motorists, bicyclists, and pedestrians. This sand management plan includes proposed sand management actions, namely the redeposition of that windblown sand back onto the beach, as they have done for several decades. And prior to developing the sand management plan, the city tracked the amount of windblown sand that accumulated in these public areas from January to March. Using this data, we were able to estimate the amount of sand that may be removed and redeposited. This allowed us to identify suitable relocation sites such that the placed sand will not exceed 6 inches above the existing beach grade and will not impact access or ocean views. The goal would be to proactively remove the sand monthly or after severe wind events, limiting the unsafe accumulation of sand that occurs. This will also help limit the potential trash and debris that may accumulate in the windblown sand. And our project includes 5 different areas stretching all the way from West 5th Street all the way down to Channel Islands Harbor, with the exclusion of the area that is managed by the County of Ventura. And I do just want to point out there's several figures here, but the green areas are highlighting where the sand will be redeposited to. And these areas were determined based on the amount of sand that is gathered from these public access areas and developed in a way so it could accommodate that level of sand. So you'll see in Area 1 here, some of the sand removal will occur along 5th Street all the way down Mandalay. And it'll be placed mostly in the larger beach section at the corner of 5th and Mandalay. And also there are a few smaller placement areas that occur right seaward of the public access points. And some of the sand in those public access points will be removed to go slightly more seaward rather than blowing quickly onto the public streets. And we have identified approximately 700 to 1,000 cubic yards of sand may be redeposited back into that area. And Area 2 is identified as Seabreeze Way to Neptune Square. So this does consist of areas along Mandalay Beach Road, all south of Seabreeze Way, and includes Capri Way, where the street dead ends at Neptune Square. And also in this area, there will be some sand removal and placement along the Neptune Square itself. And approximately 1,200 to 2,000 cubic yards of sand will be redeposited onto the beach in this area. And access to each placement area, again, will occur adjacent to those public access points. An additional work area is proposed that you may see in purple that we don't have in other areas, but that includes sand grooming, litter removal, removal of sand around playground and other equipment, and just general maintenance of the basketball courts and volleyball courts there. And Area 3 continues south of Neptune Square all the way down to Oxnard Beach Park. And most of the sand removal will only really occur along Marine Way, and it will be redeposited at a small area seaward of Marine Way. This area does include the maintenance of the ADA paths that you see in the lower section of the figure, and that will be including of trash maintenance and removal of sand in those areas. And a small placement area has been identified to the north of that. And approximately 660 to 1,000 cubic yards of sand may be redeposited in those areas. And Area 4 consists of Oxnard Shores parking lot and the beach ADA paths that you see there again in yellow. The sand will be redeposited at a placement area adjacent to those paths. Sand tends to accumulate along those paths on a frequent basis, so the city is proposing frequent sweeping in this area to limit the extreme buildup of sand on the paths. Approximately 300 to 500 cubic yards of sand will be redeposited in these areas. And the final area, Area 5, just includes the area directly adjacent to the Channel Islands Harbor entrance. And the sand that will be accumulated in this area will be transported up to Area 1, the area identified at the corner of West 5th Street and Mandalay Beach Road. So some of the project equipment we have listed here, but I do want to mention the timeline for the work. It will occur once every 2 weeks, if not more frequently during significant storm events. The city will inspect each of the project locations for wind-blown sand, before and after significant events. For areas identified causing safety concerns, equipment such as the John Deere tractor with a beach cleaner and haul vehicle attachment will be deployed to redeposit the sand in the designated placement areas. That's the picture you see there. And other heavy equipment and vehicles may be used, or hand crews will shovel and sweep along the ADA paths depending on the accessibility. Immediately after the sand has been redeposited at the sand placement area, a tractor with a sand cleaning attachment will groom over the area and remove any debris or trash. So like we mentioned in the beginning, as part of the planning, project planning, the city engaged the California Coastal Commission. Each of the California Coastal Commission comments have been incorporated into our sand management plan. A biological resources assessment was prepared to provide the city with an assessment of potential impacts to biological resources. And it also includes avoidance and minimization measures that are incorporated to reduce impacts and to comply with applicable policies and ordinances. And some of the measures here are listed on the slide. And also as part of the development of the sand management plan, a sand contamination study was conducted. The purpose of that sampling of the sand was to evaluate the presence of potential contaminants that accumulated on the streets, sidewalks, and parking lots. The results of the study concluded that the accumulated sand did not contain concentrations that would prevent it from being suitable for placement at the identified sand placement areas, which the purpose is mainly for sand nourishment. And I just want to reiterate that the sand management plan is a maintenance program to keep the beaches clean, safe, and accessible for the public. Sand nourishment activities are also important for recreation by the public and serve as a barrier against storm waves, protecting coastal residences and commercial investments. We want to thank Joe Pearson and the Planning Department, the Coastal Commission, the California State Lands Commission, Public Works, and their valuable input and guidance on the city's sand management plan. And thank you to all the residents who have provided input and for their support of the project as well.
Thank you, Mr. Brian Yanes and Jamie, was it Grendon? Grendon, thank you. Appreciate that. At this time, members may ask questions of staff. Commission.
I have a question.
Commissioner Zildorf.
What are the noise impact on this big machineries that we are going to be utilizing, and what are the hours of operation?
Commissioner Zelsdorf, hours of operation are during our business hours, normally unless there's some type of a storm event, an emergency that may acquire heavy equipment being on the beach for some odd reason, flooding, excess high waves, high tide, king tides, etc. But the noise of a heavy equipment machine, I don't know the decibels on some of those pieces of equipment. Most of the time, our general maintenance is a truck, a pickup truck, going through The beach, as you see, if you go down to the shores, you'll see trash cans in the beach, and our Parks Department services those trash cans. That's kind of a day-to-day stuff. We also do some of the walkways that is with small skid steer. Again, I don't know the decibels of those pieces of equipment, but operating hours would be during our business hours, nothing after our quiet hours.
Okay, thank you.
And so just to add, there is a condition in there that discusses that the activity should generally be between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m., but there is a allowance for them to occur at the direction of the Public Works Director or designee if there's an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson.
If that's all, Commissioner Zielsdorf, we'll go on to Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, Chair. So in the report, you offered us an incredibly detailed soil analysis. Was there a particular reason why that degree of detail was necessary?
Commissioner Nash, we've got a little bit of guidance on our testing from the Coastal Commission. I have Jerry from our Rincon Consultants that can go into more details on some of the testing that occurred out there and why we tested for certain things. But the overall result was to identify any potential volatile contaminations that would not allow us or prevent us from redepositing that sand back onto the beach.
Would you say that this was a function of the Coastal Commission's involvement, or is this analysis done to, all soils being transported from one area to another within city limits?
Jerry, I'm going to lean to Jerry on the requirements and the level of details of the testing that we did, if we did get direction, because I'm not certain if we did or not, but they were involved in our process pretty much throughout the way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners, Commissioner Nash. Yeah, this was a direct request from the Coastal Commission, and it's because it's such a unique project that, there was some concern that if the sand is sitting on the streets for a little bit longer than it's necessary, it might, pick up some contaminants. So that was, and then putting it back on the beach where you have the public. So that was the main reason behind this. And yeah.
I was very impressed because as a layman, I just, I think, well, a sand removal project, and then, I'm reading hundreds of pages of soil analysis, so I kind of wondered, why.
Oh, thank you, yeah.
Now I know why.
Very detailed.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, before you leave, your name, sir, and your organization, I just missed that.
Oh, yeah, Jerry Hiddleman, Rincon Consultants.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you. If that's all, Commissioner Nash, we'll go to Vice Chair Dr. Stewart.
Yes, this is a program that has been ongoing. In other words, this is not new. This has been happening. Is that my understanding?
That is correct.
And then I also know in the presentation, we talked about there was a piece that's under the county's direction. Are they doing something similar, or is that something totally different from what's going on here?
It is totally different. It's different jurisdiction that the county maintains, part of our city limits. So the project is within our city limits. So yes, it is a total different
kind of, well,
Yeah.
not so much the territory as I was just wondering the activity. Is the activity similar, or is it different? Or?
You know what? I can't speak for what the county is doing
Okay.
on their beach in regards to grooming, debris pickup, sand removal, sand placement. But I know a few years back when we started this process, the city of Ventura inquired, how you guys doing this? What are you doing? County of Ventura as well. We just let them know what we were doing and how we were doing and the kind of the process that we were taking and the involvement that we had with the regulatory agencies as well.
Now, talking about the process, did we talk to any of the other coastal cities up and down the coast as we built this and has we been refining it and working on it?
I spoke to other cities. None of them had any type of sand management plan. They were doing maintenance as they've always had within their jurisdiction. I hope that answers your question. If
Yes.
Okay.
Next thing, one of my kind of pet peeves is the Publix. And I know that we had the community workshop. My other question that I was going to ask is that when we sent out the notifications, what was the area that we covered as far as, in this, that's covered by these different zones?
Do you want to?
So I can speak to that. So we did send notices to all property owners within the kind of area of the project, so the Oxnard Shores neighborhood. So both for the community workshop, we sent out a little over 2,000 notices, and then for this meeting as well, we also noticed everyone within Oxnard Shores, and then everybody within 300 feet of the Oxnard Shores neighborhood. So again, sent out a little over 2,000 plus notices for that meeting as well. Plus, for both the community workshop, we also did post 2 signs out at the beach, 2 of the big notification boards. We did the same for this planning commission meeting, and then we also did the standard where we publish it in the Vita newspaper as well. So we did send out notices to the community for both the community workshop as well as the planning commission hearing tonight.
So with all of that, I have to imagine that there was a lot of comments and a lot of response. Have we been putting that into and refining this document as we've been going along, or how has that process worked?
So I can speak to some of that, and then maybe the applicant or Rincon can also add. Like during the first community workshop, one of the primary concerns were these sand fences, which were being proposed as a way of trying to prevent the sand from actually getting onto the streets and walkways. However, there were concerns raised from the community regarding those and the potential maintenance implications of those. So those were ultimately removed from the plan as a result of that. And then also, as they mentioned earlier, we did also make changes as a result of communication from the Coastal Commission. So there were some changes that did ultimately go into the plan as a result of that outreach to both the community as well as the other regulatory agencies here.
I'll add to Mr. Pearson's comments was one of our 2 main concerns was fencing that forbidding sand to go onto the public access areas or public roads, and the removal of the environmental sensitive habitat areas. And both those pieces of the document of the sand management plan were discussed with the Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission did allow us to remove the fencing. One of the issues that residents have with fencing, you put up a fence and nobody maintains it, it became a struggle for some of the residents, an eyesore. Not only was it an eyesore, but it didn't really prevent the sand from going onto the streets. So, so conversations with the Coastal Commission, that was removed. The environmental sensitive habitat areas was not allowed to be removed from our document, and that remained in as part of this sand management plan.
All right, we've talked about the Coastal Commission a few times now. Talk to me about the process, or how much did the Coastal Commission weigh in on this plan or the direction for this plan?
Well, we put together the plan, and once we finished that document that's in front of you in April 2022, we submitted that document to the Coastal Commission staff for review, any comments that they may have, and our consultants worked very well and coordinated with them and their comments and made sure that their comments were either addressed or clarified, and then were either put into the document that's here tonight, or more clarification that they were requesting. So
there wasn't any particular approval process for the Coastal Commission. They just provided comments and review of the document.
That is correct.
All right.
And maybe
Yes.
just to kind of add a little bit in terms of the overall process. So the area which this plan will be impacting is within what is called the appeals jurisdiction of the city of Oxnard. So within the appeals jurisdiction, the city does have authority to approve or deny projects. However, within that jurisdiction, the Coastal Commission does have the ability to essentially appeal any of the city's decisions to themselves. So that's one of the reasons why we work closely with the Coastal Commission, because we want to make sure that they're on the same page and ultimately are in agreement with what we end up putting forward. Because if not, then ultimately accept they can appeal it to themselves. Then the Coastal Commission would actually be the one approving or denying the project. So there's a need to work closely with the commission on these sorts of projects.
All right, thank you. I do have some more, but I will wait till another point.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dr. Stewart. We'll loop around back. Any other commissioners at this time? Commissioner Dr. Lopez.
Thank you. So it's been said that this has been happening for years. What initially initiated this on the city end? I would imagine, public safety and those right-of-way concerns, but what is it that initiated it a couple years ago?
Well, the local coastal plan allows for maintenance in our beaches. However, the details and the frequency of our maintenance and the wind-blown sand, that triggered us to come up with a plan with details. There's also biological sensitive areas on the public beaches, so we wanted to make sure we were doing the right things. And one of the other things was, and one of the main things is the sand that was blown onto the streets, sidewalks, etc., were either repurposed or taken to the landfill. And you go up and down our coast, and some of those residents, communities are seeking sand, and fortunate for us, we have an abundance of sand. But there's cost of landfill transportation, and we have our the beach right there next to us. So that was the reason for the detailed or intense sand contamination study.
Because it sounds
and testing.
Yeah, it sounds sustainable, environmental, and cost effective because of the weight to transport that to a landfill. In theory, I mean, it sounds like a great thing that I'm sure I would be grateful as a homeowner. These things do cost, a lot of money for folks. Is it, another question, is it just the public ways that would be where the sand would be moved, or would it also be done in essence a sweep across the front, the back of all the homes?
It is the public right-of-way, so we're not doing any private property. Coastal access points, the park, Neptune's Park there, sidewalks, public sidewalks, the right-of-way, streets, roads. When that wind blows, it blows, and it's
Absolutely.
everywhere. So we do get several complaints that, my vehicle can't get through, or it's slippery, so we try to address those.
Yeah, absolutely.
As soon as possible.
Last question, at least for this round. It's been said that it would happen every couple of weeks as needed. Is this something that the city is looking to do year round, or just as needed after a particularly strong windstorm?
So right now we're doing it monthly, the last week of the month. Our streets division is providing maintenance out there, and but I mean, 1 month with winds, depending on how strong they are, we could do it, clear it all up, and the next day it's just even the same or more. So it's really dependent on the wind and the storms that do come through.
Great. Well, thank you. Appreciate it, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Dr. Lopez. I have a few of my own. I think most, if not all of them, are in the RINCON drafted documents. My first will be, I'll try to list, there were several RINCON packets, and so I'll go by the page number in the agenda packet first. Oh, thank you, Commissioner Dr. Lopez. If my first question, Biological Resources Assessment, page 20, staff packet, page 69, it says that the field reconnaissance survey was on July 20, 2021. What's the standard of when you pick the days? Why is it only one sole day?
I just wanted to share the page that he was on.
Yeah, thank you. The field reconnaissance survey typically is, it should be done during hours that you may see, typical species in the area. It's best to do it in the nesting bird season because you can also identify nesting birds at that time. But you also want to do it when other species of concern may be visually found. But it is typical just to do one survey in these biological resources assessment. And if at that time of the survey, there was any rare or endangered species that would require additional protocol surveys, then we would have provided that recommendation for follow-up surveys for specific species if we deemed them necessary.
Thank you very much. In regards to, again, biological resources assessment, page 36, staff packet, page 85, in regards to nesting bird avoidance, I see that activities related to the project with the use of heavy equipment, et cetera, will be done outside of the bird breeding seasons for migratory birds as feasible. Can you define what as feasible means?
Sure. It typically is done alongside the applicant, so we would work in alignment with the applicant, and if they were going to be working anywhere that we thought that there could be nesting birds, then we would recommend a survey. So we want to keep the flexibility where if they are clearly working on the streets, that we don't want to implement above, more than they need to be conducting. So there's typical ambient noise that occurs all the time in the area, and so if they're just using trucks or hand sweeping, a nesting bird survey typically wouldn't be required with those types of activities. But if there was something above and beyond that was a special case where maybe there was some observation of nesting birds that residents alerted the city to, or that other biologists had observed in the area, then we would recommend a nesting bird survey prior to them working in those areas.
Thank you. Let's see. Moving on to, I don't know what this one is. Staff packet, page 141, in regards to the analytical results, the sand sample analytical results. I'm looking at arsenic and DDT exceeding the tier 1 ESL, and for arsenic also exceeding the DTSC something L. Can you note, or can you explain, mostly to the public and to me, it's exceeding some limit. I assume that it's important, and why is that not a factor in denying the SMP?
I'll defer to Jerry too to add to this, but they were all based upon the standards of harmful to human health. So there was no, nothing exceeded the typical standards of like what you would find in drinking water, for instance, or other soil. So it was all based upon that health standard.
Yes, thank you. That's correct. We looked at human health standards and certain thresholds that the state puts out for these type of contaminants. So as you can see, we did a total list, petroleum hydrocarbons and arsenic, as you saw, and even DDT, which is an old pesticide that stays in the environment for a long time. So we did a very comprehensive study. There were 13 sites that were tested, and I think about 10 of those, or maybe a little bit less, were on the street, but we also did samples where the sand was not on the street to make sure that the levels were the same, and they were virtually the same for both. So we're very confident that we can place the sand back on the beach from the street.
Okay, a slight follow-up, thank you for that. So when would the exceeding of these levels prevent a project from being approved? I just want to know, when would these levels being exceeded be significant in any project? I guess not necessarily this one for the reasons that you said, but for another project, when would these levels being exceeded deny that project being done?
Yeah, well, you do have your typical contamination levels that occur around gas stations or dry cleaners and places like that, and those standards are set by the state. So I don't want to go into detail on what they would be, but if those are exceeded, then you have to work with the Department of Toxic Substances Control to make sure that that soil is removed and put not only in a general landfill, but it goes to a special landfill at that point. Yeah.
Last follow-up. So these levels are more or less mandated or regulated by the state. However, Rincon and the city use levels that are harmful to humans or animals, which they are not according to these levels. Is that correct?
That is correct. We actually did both. They were way below the state levels. So that's why we looked at, human health as a factor, because you might have people and kids on the beach. So we wanted to make sure that they would be safe.
Thank you very much, sir. And for staff, if the Planning Commission so desired, could this project be logically or efficiently separated out into smaller projects?
So, Chair Rejo, I think as it's currently presented, it would need to be processed together, but I'm not sure exactly how you're envisioning breaking it out. If you're talking about like each of the sand areas in terms of like areas 1 through 5 as pulling those out separately, is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yes, more or less, if any of the areas could be separated into 2 or more projects. And so I just wanted to know the possibility in whatever sense that could be, and if that's an option available to us. Sometimes with these permits, we can break them apart or just focus on one. I get that there's a work area just situated for all of it, so I just wanted at least the staff to talk to both the efficiency and then the legality.
I got a little bit of clarification on that. I guess anything would be possible, but there would be an inequality of maintenance on these areas, right? So now you're only doing area 1, but not area 2, and residents, the sand could pile up in these sections. And would the access be able from area 1 to get to 2? I'm not sure. I wouldn't be able to determine that at this point. But again, right now, the maintenance is occurring in all those areas, and that's the stretch of area 1 to 5, which we're currently doing. And that's providing the sand removal, clearing sidewalk, clearing coastal access points, the park, accessing the beach to empty trash cans, pick up debris, because we have our weekenders, right, that leave whatever it may be, and Parks does go out there, daily to remove trash and whatever's left behind from beach users.
Thank you for that answer, and thank you all for your answers to my questions. I'll go back to the commission. If anyone hasn't asked questions, if not, I'll go back to Vice Chair Dr. Stewart. Vice Chair Dr. Stewart.
Yes, we talk about sand management plan, but is this really that, in that it's more trying to clear the right-of-way? Is that what this is really doing? Is that the driving force behind this, so that we had to manage those sands as we put them back, but we're really trying to clear the right-of-way so that people can get around and move and so forth?
As we stated earlier, it's a huge maintenance plan.
Right.
Along with, and sand is a big part of it. So we're really managing the sand, but there's also ongoing daily routine maintenance for like debris removal, emptying out trash cans, clearing the playground at Neptune's. I don't know if you've ever been in Neptune Square, but that sand could get blown on the playgrounds, the basketball court, et cetera. So it's just daily routines, and the sand management plan is a term that we're utilizing to do our general maintenance, as you stated, but it is I call it a maintenance guideline or a manual for us to follow.
Okay, I guess I'm just trying to see if we got the cart before the horse. In other words, I do recognize the fact that this is a management plan overall, but the sand management comes secondary to, in other words, the sand comes from all of these locations. And so we are really clearing as part of this management plan and then putting the sand back and ensuring that we protect other areas. That's the secondary mission of this? Is that my understanding, or am I looking at it wrong?
I believe so, Commissioner stated it earlier, it's an efficiency,
Okay.
hauling sand from the street to the landfill or to a park for the volleyball court, wherever it may be. It is an efficiency for the maintenance of that beach area.
Okay. And now we talked about, instead of putting it in the landfill, and I get that part, have we looked at these cost savings by doing it this way as opposed to just hauling it to the landfill?
I don't have those numbers. I can get those numbers and share them with you, but yes, we would have those numbers.
Okay, because that was where my mind was that, okay, before we were putting it in landfill, putting in landfill, so we're taking this sand and moving it to the landfill, now we're gonna take this sand and put it back onto the beach. And so that's what my thinking was.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dr. Stewart. If those are all your questions, Commissioner Dr. Lopez, you stated you might have more questions. Thank you. I'll go back to the commission for any last-minute questions. And if not, we'll go on to public comment. Madam Secretary, I know that there's public comment. Let's first, if you could please go with those who signed up prior to the meeting, and then I'll take over with those who submitted, and then anything in Zoom land.
The submissions we have, Chair, are from Lauren Fife, Laura Johnson, and Jim Carr.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. If Ms. Fife, if I heard that correctly, Ms. Lauren Fife, if they are on Zoom land or here in person, if you could please raise your hand or come to the dais. Madam Secretary, do I see? Okay, thank you. You have 3 minutes and you can begin when ready, Ms. Fife. I'll ask again. Hold up the time.
Madam Secretary, do I see? Okay, thank you.
Could you repeat that, please? And then we'll start the time if I can hear you.
You can begin when ready, Ms. Five.
Okay, thank you. You have 3 minutes. You can begin.
I'll ask again. Hold up the time. Madam Secretary, do I see? Okay, thank you.
I believe whoever's on the call might be having their video on.
Can you repeat that, please? And then we'll-
Excuse me, can you mute the whatever your meeting is on?
Thank you. You have 3 minutes. You can begin. I'll ask again. Hold up the time. Madam Secretary, do I see? Okay, thank you.
I think at this time, Madam Secretary, can you mute? We're gonna go back at the end. If you're viewing on YouTube or on the TV, there is a slight delay. We're gonna go back to you at the end. So thank you. If I heard it correctly, Johnson, Miss or Mr. Johnson, if they could.
Yeah.
Okay,
if you're viewing on YouTube or on the TV, there is a slight delay. We're gonna go.
Okay, I'll do that at the end. If Mr. or Ms. Johnson is not in here, we'll go on to the third person. I forgot, who is that, Madam Secretary?
Jim Carr.
Jim Carr. If Jim Carr could come up, okay, thank you. And Mr. Carr, you have 3 minutes. Okay. If there's no objection from commission, we'll let.
Madam Secretary. Jim Carr. Jim Carr. Jim Carr could come up. Okay.
It appears as though the callers waiting on the line are all watching on YouTube, and so there's a delay, and so what you're hearing is the audio from the YouTube. So I would recommend going to the in-person speakers and then maybe going to the online speakers at the end.
Thank you for that suggestion, Mr. Zaragoza. We will go to the submitted speakers and go back to Zoom land. The first one I have is Mr. Walter Hagedorn. You have 3 minutes when you come to the dais. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Walter Hagedum. I'm chair of the Oxnard Shores Neighborhood Council. About 3 years ago, I met Mr. Yanis here at the an INCO meeting, and I gave him my card. I said, I've heard about the sand management project, and you really have to call me, because if you're dealing with the Coast Commission, you're dealing with some things that are very important to us. And in the 3 years, I have not gotten a call. And one of the reasons this is important is because during the short-term rental process, we asked for a Freedom of Information Act, and we received in the mail, in the group of emails, we found the actual local coastal plan for Oxnard Shores, which had never been done, but was done in the 1988 legal battle that went on, and it was required by the Coast Commission. And in that, it has some very important things that are important to Oxnard Shores. One, that the Oxnard Shores beach is not meant for recreational purposes, which doesn't mean we don't allow people. We love people to come, but it means we don't have parking lots, we don't have restrooms, we don't have lifeguards, and it makes it a very unique beach in all of California. And people love to come there because of its tranquility and other things. But this is never. I started about 5 years ago to ask the the planning department to acknowledge this. They have not. I told Mr. Yanis that we had to do this at the community workshop that was in 2022. I excoriated the city because I hadn't heard from them that this needed to be included. About a year later, Councilman Perillo sent a letter to the Public Works Department saying they had to deal with this and call me. They never did. So point one is, I would like to have this postponed until someone decides to look at this document, which is very important to us. The second point is, in the meeting on the community workshop, which was really sort of sketchy. You know, these community workshops are very odd. They were talking about solving the problem by putting some kind of a sand fence or whatever. I don't know what it would be, but it was solving the problem. And they're saying that one person or some person said, oh, well, it's not right. Well, I'm chair of the Oxnard Shores Neighborhood Council. We have 1,000 emails. We could talk to the public if someone would talk to us, and they never did. Some of these issues, when it comes to, so this whole going to the Coast Commission, especially the staff, what we found in the short-term rental issues is that we go to the staff, and the staff was 180 degrees out of sync with what the Coast Commission was doing. So we went as a group of private citizens, and we brought things to the Planning Commission, which resulted in a very good ordinance, but because we went to the Coast Commission itself, not to the staff. So there are several things here. One, I would like to make sure that the Oxnard Shores Neighborhood Council and the public is involved in this, and that we also get this local coastal plan approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hagedum. We'll go back to Mr. Carr. You have 3 minutes.
Chair, it appears he does not want to speak after all.
Okay. We'll go back to Zoom land if there's no other submitted speakers. First to Mr. and Ms. Fife. If you could unmute by pressing *9. Please remember to mute your whatever other place you're viewing this meeting, and you have 3 minutes when you begin to speak.
Chair, I believe Lauren Fife is the 818 number. So you might be, yeah, that one.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please begin. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. All right. First off, thank you to the members of the Planning Commission, city staff, and RINCON for all of your hard work on behalf of our community. My name is Lauren Fife, and I serve as president of the Colony at Mandalay Beach HOA. We represent the residents of 440 homes on 40 acres immediately adjacent to areas 3 and 4 included in the city's updated sand management plan proposal for the Oxnard State Beach and Oxnard Shores area. I'm expressing views shared by many, if not all, of my neighbors who live in the colony, where I'm a longtime resident, and the Oxnard Shores neighborhood in which we're located. We're all directly impacted by this proposal. I think the overwhelming majority of folks who visit these beach areas, tens of thousands of individuals each year, share our concerns with the way the city has mismanaged the beaches, parks, and open areas that are affected by this proposal, at least in areas 3 and 4. We're appreciative that city staff recommended that this item no longer be an action item for the Planning Commission tonight.
Sorry, I think you might have muted him.
Was it lost or was he muted?
Chair, I muted the other phone number.
I think he might have gotten. There.
Somebody is muting me from outside. I'm not sure who's doing it, but it's sort of difficult to maintain a train of thought when I keep getting a message.
Yeah, sir. I'm gonna start the time at 3 minutes. It's up to you if you want to decide to go at the beginning or continue your remarks from 30 seconds ago. So I'm giving you but I'm giving you 3 minutes again, starting now. Please begin.
Okay.
Or continue.
Thank you. I'm not sure where I got cut off, so I'll go ahead and start at the beginning. I wanted to thank the Planning Commission, the city staff, and Rincon for all the hard work on behalf of the community. I'm Lauren Fife. I'm president of the colony at Mandalay Beach. Our HOA represents the residents of 440 homes adjacent to areas 3 and 4, which are included in the city's updated sand management plan proposal that is under consideration right now. My views, I think, reflect the views of many neighbors who live in the colony and the Oxnard Shores neighborhood in which we're located. We're all directly impacted by this proposal. I think the overwhelming majority of folks who visit these beach areas, tens of thousands of folks each year, share our concerns with the way the city has mismanaged the beaches, parks, and open areas that are affected by this proposal, at least in areas 3 and 4. We're appreciative that the city staff recommended that this item no longer be an action item for the Planning Commission tonight. Allowing less than 7 days to review a package like this that took 2 years to assemble and expecting meaningful comments was insensitive and certainly underestimated the very strong opposition in the community to many aspects of this proposal. We respectfully suggest that the Planning Commission give us at least a couple of months, preferably into 2025, to complete our review of this proposal and to discuss our concerns with city staff. Like the Oxnard Shores Neighborhood Council, we reached out to the city 2 years ago following the neighborhood workshop, to which we gave detailed objections and suggestions, and the city never reached out to us. So that's a huge shortfall in a process, as reflected by the Coastal Commission, that is strongly focused on the input from neighbors. I've already emailed in far more detailed objections to the proposal, so I won't waste your time getting into the nitty-gritty, other than to say that I hope staff reviews them carefully and recognizes that this proposal needs to be heavily reworked before it's acted upon by the Planning Commission. My colleagues and I would like to sit down with the Public Works staff, representatives of the Zachary Dunes Hotel, the Oxnard Shores Neighborhood Council, and the Coastal Commission to review the issues raised in the proposal, at least about areas 3 and 4, and to find ways to reach common ground. The working group that I worked with on our initial limited review of this current proposal included several community activists, several lawyers, and one of our colony residents who happens to have represented Oxnard in the state Senate and Assembly and served on the Coastal Commission with distinction. We have a vast amount of day-to-day history living in this area and professional expertise that could be invaluable to the city. We volunteered to work with the city 2 years ago on this proposal following the community workshop, particularly as it relates to areas 3 and 4, but the city never reached out for input. By working together with us, we can all avoid this proposal turning into ugly, costly adversarial proceedings that nobody wants to occur.
Thank you, sir. That's your time.
Find ways to help the city.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to our second speaker again, that I have Mr. and Mrs. Joshua or the like.
Chair, the other online speaker may be Laura Johnson.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Laura Johnson, if you could raise your hand on Zoom. And I'll ask Madam Secretary if she's able to unmute you so we can begin the 3 minutes. You have
Good
3
evening.
minutes.
This is Laura Johnson.
Please continue.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Johnson. Yes, and I'm a resident of the city of Oxnard. I'm happy to hear that this is going to be continued, but I would like to request that the information that was provided by Mr. Fife, I totally endorse his views that he's expressed, and it is a lot of detail, and we do hope that you will take the time to review all of that. And other than that, I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And last on my list, Mr. Carr. None. And Madam Secretary, are there any other speaker cards that were submitted or anyone on Zoom land who have raised their hands?
No, Chair, no other speaker cards. There is another on Zoom, but they have not raised their hand to talk.
Okay, thank you very much. Does the applicant or staff wish to, Commissioner Nash?
We did have an audience member raise his hand.
I believe that, sir, did you wish to speak? And after you do so, if you could complete a speaker card with the Madam Secretary, please. Thank
You
you.
want me to fill out a card first?
After, it's fine.
After. I'd be
Thank
happy
you,
to.
sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Stuart Horwitz. I live on Mandalay Beach Road. I've been a resident there for going on 13 years. I noticed on this plan that you have 13 locations. The public access next to my residence and my neighbor's residence is a public access used by a lot of surfers daily, especially now. Our streets are full. You have not addressed that issue, and we have photographs here of where, when we moved in 12 or 13 years ago, we were able to go straight out to the beach. We have a neighbor who has a child that's very disabled. Again, we have photographs of a special buggy that they built. So this child could go to the beach because that's basically the only pleasure he has. He doesn't speak, he has constant care. And since this sand has built up, he is not able to get out there. And that, I believe, is a violation of the ADA. This site needs to be addressed. Some of the other sites are pretty flat. Now, I understand what they're saying from 5th Street on down. Yes, when the wind blows, it needs to be removed. And they have been removing it. And 3 or 4 days later in the wintertime, we have the same problem again. So it has to be managed. But it also has to be, these sites have to be accessible for the public for the ADA. And this is not in this plan. And I think if it does not occur, I think the city will have a bigger problem. So I would appreciate finding out why this particular site next to my residence, again, which is a public access, is not part of this plan. And the other thing I want to let you know is, the gentleman said that they gave notice. That's not true. We personally copied one letter that came from a neighbor and then brought it to our other neighbors. There was one sign posted for this hearing, nothing on 5th Street, nothing anywhere else. So the rest of the neighbors would not even know about this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Horowitz. And if you could complete a speaker card just for the records, thank you so much. If there's no other public comment, and thank you, Commissioner Nash, for alerting me to the hand raise. If applicant or staff wish to respond to the public comments at this time.
I'm on the phone. Hello?
Hello, ma'am. We hear you.
This is Deirdre. I've been on the phone. I've been waiting. My hand has been raised. I don't know what's wrong with your communications, but I'm right here and I have a few comments.
You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've been watching. I read all the documents. I read everything. It's been obvious to me that none of you have been to Oxnard Shores. I was the only commissioner on the Planning Commission that lived in Oxnard Shores. Oxnard, by the way, only has one beach. All right? We don't have Hollywood Beach. We don't have Silver Strand. We don't have any of that. We have one beach, and it's called Oxnard Shores. The problem we are having with the sand is because of the wind that comes onto the beach eastward from the wind flow. Why does the Coastal Commission control the beach? Because in 1988, there was litigation between the oceanfront owners and the oceanfront owners that ended in a global settlement where Oxnard signed off, Coastal Commission signed off, state, everyone signed off, Attorney General signed off, and that agreement in 1988 created your coastal access points in Oxnard Shores. Before that 1988 agreement, there was no insured coastal access. And that's why if any of you would bother to go down to the beach and take a look, you'll see that the coastal access signs are what color? What color are they? They're brown. What does brown mean? Brown means it's a state sign, okay? So all the coastal access that's along Mandalay Beach Road that connects Mandalay Beach Road down to the ocean front, they're state, okay? So that's why the Coastal Commission has control over the issue that's before you now. The city of Oxnard was given the not proprietary, but the kind of control over the beach. But when Oxnard wants to do anything on the beach, they have to get approval from the Coastal Commission. That's why this coastal development permit is before you. Look at what is before you. This has nothing to do with whose sand is in front of whose house or whatever. This is authority. Who has the authority to move the sand? And it's the Coastal Commission. That's why anytime a dumpster or anything goes down on the beach, they have to have a coastal development permit from the Coastal Commission to move the sand. So, and the colony and the hotel development and the Oxnard Beach Park, that was all subject to a development agreement.
Thank you, Ms. Frank.
And
that's your
maybe
time.
you should take a look.
Thank you. If there's no other public comment, we'll move back to applicant, city staff, if they wish to respond to the public comment. Oh. Yes, that's fine. If you could complete a speaker card after you speak, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, my name's Sarah Goldman. I live on Mandalay Beach Road as well. I kind of just reiterating what my neighbor Stu was saying, and I'm wondering why there are certain coastal access points that weren't addressed in this. And I was surprised. I have been so busy that I actually am just kind of catching up on this. I live right across the street from a coastal access point that has been completely ignored in this. And it's the worst one. It's by leaps and bounds worse than the other ones. It doesn't even make it out onto the street because it's a complete mountain straight uphill. So can we get an answer to that as why some were, because we've been told by your flyers and the mail and everything that it's 14 points, but until today when I watched your video, I noticed that ours was completely ignored. And if we can just find out which one, why some were ignored and some were taken care of, that'd be great.
Thank you very much, Ms. Goldman. Yeah, thank you. We'll go to staff comments or replies to public comments unless I missed a hand. And thank you again, commissioners, for that. Seeing none, Mr. Pearson or Mr. Staff, or Mr. Yanis, thank you.
Chair and Commissioner, Brian Yanis, Assistant Public Works Director. I have no comments. We've heard the comments that were given. We'll go back and look at some of the comments made, and was something missed or was something need to be added, that's definitely an opportunity we can still do. So I'd have to look into some of the things that were mentioned today, work with Joe and make those modifications, but definitely have to go back and listen to some of the comments.
Thank you, Mr. Yanis. Mr. Pearson.
Just kind of a general statement, which is ultimately kind of going back to what the goal is, Mr. Yanez mentioned earlier, which is this is really that maintenance plan, really for those public coastal access ways. So there's other items that may need to be addressed as it relates to the coastal areas, and the city is also kicking off its local coastal program. So some of these issues might be addressed as part of that, but ultimately the project that is being presented is really just there as that maintenance program, that ability to keep the streets and the walkways and the coastal access available. And as Mr. Yanez said, if there's a access way that was missed, we can go back and take a look and make sure that we did capture all of those. But ultimately, again, it is just intended to help maintain that coastal access, which is really one of the primary goals of both our current local coastal plan as well as the Coastal Act as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. I see your virtual hand raised, Commissioner Nash. Please state your comment.
I can make a comment or provide direction to staff or get a clarification, so.
Okay, let us, if there's no objection, I'm going to close the public hearing. With no objection, I'm closing the public hearing. We will now move on to deliberation. I'll recognize Commissioner Nash first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just a point of clarification, I don't want to move into a territory because we are postponing this to a date certain. So
I'll clarify that. Staff has suggested / recommended that this item be postponed, and given it's up to the Planning Commission to make that motion. So it does appear that that might be the possible action, but we'll wait to hear from the commission for a motion second and a vote whether to actually postpone it.
Well, I would like, thank you, Chair. I would like to make one suggestion to the staff before we move to continue this item.
Yes, Commissioner Nash. We'll use that as part of the deliberation, and you may make your comments as you see fit.
Could you clarify that? So.
Comments would usually be directed to the commission, but you can make your comments to the staff if there's no objection from the commission.
Okay, thank you. And it's really just a single suggestion, because what I'm hearing from the speakers is the fact that the coastal access paths have so much sand. So it's my understanding of the Coastal Commission that it's a real high priority to ensure that the public has access to the coast. And I know for myself, if I'm confronted with a mountain of sand, then that would impede my ability to access and enjoy the coast. So I would hope that any sand management plan that comes before us has a program or a policy to deal with keeping these coastal access paths clear for the entire public, not only surfers, but also, the disabled and the old. And that would be my suggestion. Thank you, Chair, for offering me the opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Nash. Any others from the commission? Vice Chair Dr. Stewart.
Yes, I hear what you have to say. I guess my thoughts are is that this be postponed, but be postponed to some date certain, a little ways out. And the reason why I'm asking that is that, listening to what was said, I hear comments like mismanagement, but that doesn't tell me anything. In other words, perhaps we need to sit down in some kind of workshop, like across the street on the first floor there with, different stakeholders, and sit down and try to, work this out a little bit and then bring it back to this commission for approval. But I don't know how much time that would take, and I don't think it's something that can be done in a couple of weeks or something like that. So that's just my thought, kind of taking what you have, but putting it all under that umbrella.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dr. Stewart. And I believe I can speak a little for staff that they were suggesting a December 19 date. And so I'm not sure if that answered your concerns, but we'll go to the rest of the commission at this time. Seeing and hearing none, a motion is in order. Commissioner Nash.
I would move that we postpone this item to a date certain of November 19th, I believe.
December
19th, 2024.
Thank you. It has been moved by Commissioner Nash to postpone this item to a date certain, December 19. Is there a second?
Chair, I would second.
Seconded by Commissioner Schuelke. Any deliberation on the motion before us? Commissioner Dr. Lopez.
I'll just say a quick concern, that December 19th, really close to the end of the year and the holidays. I know some folks travel, it's a busy time for families and residents, and so I would hate for that to kind of serve as a reason why folks, or counterproductive to the engagement that we're trying to facilitate. So not sure if it would be wiser to look at the first meeting in 2025, but I could easily see that just being bumped off priority for a lot of folks that close to holidays.
Thank you, Commissioner Dr. Lopez. Vice Chair Dr. Stewart.
Yes, I like your date, but as we come back from the holidays, my thoughts are is that it may take us a little bit of time to get things back in motion and moving. So my thoughts are perhaps the second date in January. And I know we're pushing it off, but my thoughts are let's do it right than to do it. In other words, it's not about doing it, it's about getting all the ingredients in there so that it is, the best possible plan.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dr. Stewart. Any others from the commission? Commissioner Nash?
Thank you, Chair. And I will rely upon our parliamentarian to let us know how to proceed, but I'm more than happy to amend my date to the second meeting in January, which would be the third Thursday.
Thank you for those comments, Commissioner Nash. And I believe that there are a variety of opinions on when to postpone the date. I was actually planning to suggest December 5. And so at this time, with a variety of options available to us, if the committee, at least for Commissioner Dr. Lopez and Commissioner Connolly, know that at least in the subcommittee for bylaws, we were talking in informal consideration and where there were very little rules in regards to the debate. This commission in particular, I believe last year or this year, talked in a committee of the whole in which Commissioner Nash was the chair for that committee. If there's no objection, I move that we go into, if there's no objection, that we move into a quasi-committee of the whole, which is similar to a committee of the whole, except that I, as a chair, will still remain chair of the committee, and that there will be no limits in regards to our debates so that we can fully discuss the many options in regards to when to postpone the date. When we come to an agreement or a consensus, then we'll move it into the public body, and then we can vote on that. We can move to vote on that date. Is there any objection to moving into a committee or quasi-committee of the whole? Seeing no objections to that, I'm going to ask anyone for any of their suggestions. I will come up with a motion or at least a suggestion, and if we get a majority, we'll go back into regular session. I'll move across the dais because I feel that there's going to be options even from just one person. So Commissioner Zilsdorf.
I would take the December 5th.
Thank you. And Commissioner Nash?
December 5th is fine by me.
And you don't have to list a single date. You can list multiple dates if you'd like, but I'm just noting what I have, and I'll choose from the top, and then we'll go from there. So Commissioner Zilsdorf, I have you for December 5. If you would like to add more, let me know before we move out of committee of the, or quasi-committee of the whole. Commissioner Nash, December 5, any other dates? Thank you, Commissioner Nash. Commissioner Dr. Lopez.
I'm going to suggest the second meeting in January, which is the third Thursday, as the first option. And alternatively, I can also make the 5th work
Thank you, Commissioner Dr. Lopez. I'm going to note you down for January 16 and for December 5.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Dr. Stewart.
Yes, I'm for January 16th. Only being is that November, we have Thanksgiving. Then we roll into the Christmas holidays. We have people that are going to be out of town, perhaps traveling, and things during the holidays take on a different slant. And so my thoughts are, let us get back from the holidays. Let's get back after the first of the year, New Year's and all of that. Gives us a couple of weeks to sit down and crunch this so that we ensure that we have all of the items that need to be into this plan are done. We can talk about it, we can work on it, and the holidays are now behind us.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dr. Stewart. Commissioner Schulke.
I'm fine with any of the dates that have been referenced.
Okay. Thank you. I'll have you as no preference, and my personal preference is to do any date in December. So I'm marking myself down as December 5 and December 19. Anyone else want to add any other dates or make any other comments at this time? Right now, I'm going to proceed with an informal vote, or I guess a formal vote on the informal consideration that we're going to get to the regular session. And so I'm going to ask for a vote. Madam Secretary, you don't have to take the roll call. I'd like to see hands that December 5 is okay to move into regular session. Thank you very much. That's a majority for us to get out of the quasi-committee of the whole. And so we are moving back into regular session. And as the chair of the quasi-committee of the whole, it has been moved by the quasi-committee of the whole to postpone the date or postpone this item to a date certain of December 5. It doesn't need a second because it's a committee with more than one person. It is assumed that there is a second. We'll now move on to deliberation on the motion before us to postpone this item to December 5. Is there any deliberation on the motion before us? Vice Chair Dr. Stewart.
Yes, I guess I have a question for staff. May I ask it?
You know what, yes.
Okay.
If there's no objections from the commission, you can ask a
All
question
right.
of staff.
If we move to that date, how fast can staff, Public Works, and so forth get a meeting together so that we can sit down and analyze this and see if we can work some of the kinks out? Is that enough time? Can it, really happen?
So Vice Chair Dr. Stewart, if you're referring to like a meeting with the Planning Commission, right now we're continuing it to the next Planning Commission meeting, so there wouldn't be a meeting with the commission, but we would be able to have a meeting with staff as well as reaching out to those speakers that have submitted comments. But the commission, because this item is coming before the commission, would not be part of that meeting.
Okay. I guess what I'm looking for is to involve the public in this. So in other words, we've heard some comments tonight. I'm sure there's other comments out there. So how do we address those comments and look to see if they need to be incorporated? Doesn't mean they all are incorporated, but what needs to be incorporated as we refine the document. And so my question is, can we do this? If we can't do this, then let's not just pick a date for the sake of a date.
So Vice Chair Dr. Stewart, I can work with the Public Works team to try to set up a meeting with the individuals that have submitted comments or take their comments and try to incorporate them as they fit within, again, the intent of this document. I believe that we can make that happen before the next meeting.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dr. Stewart. If there's no other deliberation on the motion before us, again, the motion is to postpone this item to a date certain, December 5. With no other deliberation, Madam Secretary, can we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Nash?
Aye.
Commissioner Schulke?
Aye.
Vice Chair Dr. Stewart?
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez?
Aye.
Commissioner Zielsdorf? Aye. Chair Arrejo?
Aye.
This motion passes.
Thank you very much. And before we move on to the study sessions, I'd like to suggest or recommend, but not necessarily mandate, that with the December 5 date, that we have postponed this to get all your questions to the planning department by November 15. Let's be aggressive. And so if you're a little bit late, they'll see your comments on November 18. Again, a recommendation just for the staff to get any answers and replies to us, and maybe even a back and forth over those 2.5 weeks before December 5. Thank you very much, and thank you all. Do we need a quick break, Commission? Looking? Okay, I hear a yes. If there's no objection, we'll go into recess of 5 minutes. We're in recess. We are now back in session, and now we'll move on to agenda item section, study session reports. Study session G1 is the update to the City of Oxnard CEQA threshold guidelines. This study session will be to discuss updates to the City of Oxnard CEQA guidelines used to provide direction regarding how to carry out the CEQA environmental review process and what constituted a significant environmental impact for projects in Oxnard. City staff Kathleen Mallory, AICP Long Range Planning and Sustainability Manager, and Heather Davis, Project Planner. I'll turn it over to Ms. Mallory.
Hello, Chair Arreo, Vice Chair Stewart, members of the Planning Commission. Nice to see you. It's been a few years. My team leads the long-range planning and sustainability work. I like to say it's anything fun and exciting in California we get to help do. And we are so happy to bring this item before you tonight. We have a number of people that have been instrumental in supporting this effort, which we've been working on for about 2.5 years. We've got Heather Davis, who's on. She's the project planner with Rincon Consultants. We also have George Dix, who will be doing part of the presentation. He's with Rincon. And we also have the fire chief, I believe he's on, so we appreciate that. And we have Assistant Chief McNaughton, and we appreciate his support with this as well. And finally, we have John Mugridge with Fair and Piers, who's assisted with the transportation and circulation section. So Diego, if you can bring up the presentation. How we'd like to handle the presentation this evening is I'll do the first few slides and then turn it over to George. George will then cover the bulk of the presentation, but then have the presentation regarding transportation and circulation covered by John Mugridge with the Fair and Piers, and then I'll just round it out to kind of walk us through the next steps. We would ask that you hold your questions so that we can get through. Perhaps we'll have some of the answers in our presentation to questions you may have. And then also I just wanted to note that we did receive a comment letter from Commissioner Nash, and we have provided responses to that, and you should have that at the dais, and the consulting team also has copies of that. So with that, I think, Diego, are we good to go with the presentation? Ah, there you are. Thank you. All right, well, thank you. We gave a kind of a lengthy introduction there. So we just wanted to talk about, what the purpose of the CEQA thresholds are, and we're going to be talking through this presentation about some key changes. The document before you really does cover what the state advises and tells the cities and jurisdictions to do in terms of how to address the California Environmental Quality Act. So the thresholds and guidelines really evaluate, okay, this is not good. There we go. So the CEQA thresholds and guidelines really evaluate development projects when they come forward to the city or jurisdiction. And I use that interchangeably. It could be a county or a city or a district. And this establishes the framework for evaluating the environmental impacts of a development project. And the document before you does identify the areas that align with what the state says you should look at, and it identifies the methods and the criteria for which then you and how you evaluate impacts. We also do use this flow chart within the CEQA guidelines. It helps us determine, and I apologize, I'm going to turn my back here. It helps us determine how and where and what type of environmental document should be considered. So the orange box, and this is within the CEQA guidelines before you this evening, this is not proposing to change. This is consistent with what the state law says and what other cities and jurisdictions do and use. So you have your orange box, or yellow box, which identifies what type of project you're going to be, the city is taking in. If it's exempt, we go to one step to the right, that blue box. If it's not, the red box, we proceed down to determine if the project has a significant impact, and if it does, how do we deal with the impacts? Are they negatively, is the appropriate environmental document a negative declaration, meaning no mitigation is needed, or is there a need for a mitigation of any of those environmental impacts? Again, the list that we'll be covering this evening, those topic areas. And then the steps below there, the blue, the further black, and then the pink. These are just steps in the process and notification requirements that align with state law. On step 3, that sort of gray box, if a project is determined that it will have significant impacts that can't be mitigated, then we would go to the right, and that purple box identifies when an environmental impact report would be prepared. And the green and the orange are just procedural timeframes for which the state law specifies notification to the community. And then the pink box is the decision on the project, and then the action last in terms of filing the notification with the county as well as the state clearinghouse if it's subject to an EIR document. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to George, and he's going to talk about the main topics that we're bringing before the commission this evening. And I'll be controlling the presentations. You just tell me when to go forward, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So the city's guidelines were last updated in 2017. This current update that we're working on is mostly driven by updates to the state CEQA guidelines. Every year, the state OPR issues new CEQA guidelines. The most recent or most substantial recent revisions were in 2019 edition. And so this update's been driven to capture the last 2 years of updates to the state CEQA guidelines. Some of the changes that are reflected in this new updated version is the background policies and methodology have been updated and reorganized throughout. And then some of the initial checklist topics have been reorganized, especially for energy, greenhouse gas emissions, transportation, circulation, and wildfire, which are shown here in bold. Essentially, these changes to the checklist would make the city CEQA guidelines consistent with the OPR, the state CEQA guideline checklist. You can go to the next slide, please. And so like I was just mentioning, the key changes to the CEQA guidelines, the city CEQA guidelines are to the checklist section. That includes the energy, greenhouse gas emission section, wildfire, and transportation. Most of these topics were already addressed in the 2017 CEQA guidelines, but now they're just sort of reorganized into their own standalone sections, or they have slightly new checklist questions. Wildfire is sort of a new section in itself, although there were some wildfire impacts discussed in the 2017 CEQA guidelines under the hazard section. And then in transportation, that's always been a CEQA topic, but with SB 743, which we'll talk about later, and the 2019 state CEQA guidelines, the way that we look at transportation has changed from traffic delay and LOS to vehicle miles traveled, or more commonly known as VMT. And so another key change to this update to the CEQA guidelines is incorporation of updated CEQA thresholds of significance. VMT is a good example of that. And then there's new and specific methodologies that are recommended to use for analyzing project impacts. Okay, go to the next slide, please. And so these next few slides, we're going to talk about those key changes, the checklist topics I just listed. The first being energy. So energy's moved, the 2017 CEQA guidelines, energy impacts are included underneath the utility section, but with this update, we're moving it into its own section. Again, this will be consistent with the state CEQA guidelines. And in addition, the energy section will now provide methodology in assessing energy impacts, such as evaluating if the project reduces vehicle dependency or includes renewable energy components. And this approach would be compliant with the City Council's adopted Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, better known as the CAP. Okay, next slide, please. Another section that has a key update in the CEQA guidelines is the greenhouse gas emissions section. So in the 2017 CEQA guidelines, this is referred to as the climate change and greenhouse gas emissions section. Very simple change. We're just changing the title. We're also making minor changes to checklist questions for consistency with the state CEQA guidelines. We've rewritten the methods to address consistency with the city's CAP. And we're providing a table of key project attributes that reduce GHG. These are taken from CARB's 2022 scoping plan and are added to the methodology. The wildfire, like I mentioned, can be looked at as a new section, although we have always evaluated the potential for fire hazards. This is a new standalone section. Again, to make it consistent with the state CEQA guidelines. It's really meant to be applicable to projects in or near high or very high fire hazard severity zones as mapped by the state. The checklist questions will focus on conflicts with emergency response plans, exposure to wildfire or wildfire pollutants, the potential to exacerbate wildfire, exposure to post-fire hazards like landslides, flooding, some of the impacts you see after a major wildfire event. Then from here, we're going to get into the transportation updates, and I'm going to hand it over to John with Darren Pierce.
Thank you, George. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is John Mugridge. I'm with Fair & Pearce Transportation Consultants, and we've been helping the City of Oxnard over the past couple of years develop new traffic study guidance. Tonight, I'd like to talk a little bit about the regulatory environment and how that affects those guidelines moving forward. So Senate Bill 743 is really the biggest change here. It's how we evaluate transportation impacts for development projects under CEQA. Before 743, you may be very familiar with the term level of service. We use that extensively to evaluate traffic impacts, as we call them. We used a sliding scale from level of service A through to F, where A was sort of free flow conditions on the roadways, to F, which was very congested conditions. And that really measures the impact on a driver or to a driver, how long they get delayed at an intersection, how long they are stuck in congestion. So the state looked at that and they said, we don't really like that anymore. We want to shift to a methodology that looks at impacts of driving on the environment. So fast forward to today, we're now using what we call vehicle miles traveled as a metric, and that basically represents trips that are generated by a development project and how far they travel and where they go to and from. And that really measures the impact of driving. Senate Bill 743 was also designed to promote multimodal networks in terms of encouraging people to walk, to take transit, and to ride bikes. It was also designed to increase the diversity of land use types in a project. So, the term mixed use comes into play here with different mixes of uses within one building, and that is designed to help reduce travel as well. And the other thing that 743 was designed to do was to look at other areas of impacts, such as air quality impacts, noise impacts, and safety concerns. So next slide, please. So how does this all affect the City of Oxnard moving forward? Well, I'd like to think of this as sort of a two-pronged approach here. We've got the CEQA work and we've got what I call the non-CEQA work. So VMT and the Senate Bill 743 fits under the CEQA umbrella, and that's where we evaluate transportation impacts. And if we have impacts from projects, we have to mitigate them or have statements of override. In terms of the non-CEQA work, that's where you can look at things like roadway operations that you've been used to looking at in the past. You can still evaluate level of service, conditions, and deficiencies that happen on the roadways, look at things like truck traffic, as well as sort of site access. How does the driveway work? Is a new signal needed? Is the parking okay for the project? Is the site circulation acceptable? So those things that you've been used to seeing in the past, you will still see here with projects moving forward. One other thing I'd just like to point out here is that level of service is still required as a general plan consistency check. That isn't a CEQA thing, but it's just something to note. Next slide. So you might ask yourself, when is a VMT analysis required? Well, the city has decided to follow most of the state guidance here, and there are some ways in which projects can be exempt from VMT, and I'm just going to run through them quickly. So if your project is a small project, say it's a 10 to 20 unit condominium building or a small office building, a small place of employment that generates less than 110 daily trips, then you wouldn't be required to do a specific VMT assessment under CEQA. If you've got a retail project that's less than 50,000 square feet and is local serving, things like coffee shops, dry cleaners, grocery stores, those don't also need to have a VMT analysis done because they're assumed to have no sort of VMT impact. If you're a big box establishment or something like a regional mall, then they're a different story. You do have to have an analysis done with those, and that's a much more quantitative assessment. Also, if your project is located within half a mile of quality transit or a rail station, you are exempt from VMT analysis as well. And when I say quality transit, I'm talking about buses with headways of 15 minutes or less. And that there may not be many of those now in the city, but in the future there may be. And the final one is whether you're located, or if you're located in a VMT efficient area. And what we did here was we mapped all of the city using data from the VCTC travel model to determine which parts of the city were VMT efficient and which parts are not very efficient. If you don't meet any of the criteria as a project here, then you have to go into what I would call a full-blown quantitative assessment of VMT, which would require more detailed calculations, more quantitative analysis. Next slide. I'd like to just end by showing you a couple of maps. This is the low VMT screening that I just talked about. So for example, if you have a residential project or an employment project, you can come in and look at these maps first of all to determine if you have a VMT issue. And if you're located within the blue areas in the city, then you screen out of doing any further analysis. If you are located within the yellow or the red areas, then you have to look at it in a lot more detail and essentially calculate your VMT on a quantitative level, come back to the city, talk about it, and see if you have an issue with VMT moving forward that needs to be mitigated or whether it can be improved by project design. With that, I'll hand it back to Kathleen.
Thank you very much. So what we wanted to just walk through is the next step. So we wanted to have the study session. We know that this is a little bit complicated. We wanted to be able to answer questions that you have, and then we will bring the resolution back to the Planning Commission, and they'll make a recommendation to council. There is no hearing required. This would be a report and a resolution. And we principally will be leaning on the detailed report that the team prepared and provided for tonight for your November 3rd action. So with that, and then we'll go to council on December 3rd. So we're happy to answer any questions with the team, and I turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Really appreciate that presentation. Before I go to the rest of the commission, I saw a date. Was that November? I saw November 3. Is that correct?
November 5th is a Tuesday. I know that.
So this will be November 7th. It's the first November.
Okay, I think
The first meeting in November, yes.
Okay, that's what I assume. I think in the presentation was incorrect. So November 7th for everyone, and thank you for that. I'll go first to Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Mallory. A couple of things. I submitted my questions, and I submitted them late, and I apologize for that. I guess that's my nature. On slide number 3, I don't know if we can call that up.
Diego, can you put the presentation back up, please? Thank you. It's like magic, right? It's quite amazing.
Now, this is a great flow chart, and I'm not sure if something similar to it is already included in our 2030 general plan. But again, I would love to see this under the CEQA section in our general plan, because I think it's really helpful. Okay, that's enough for slide number 3. Now it's slide number 9. And I'm not quite sure why the state wanted to move to VMT, because I don't think VMT can predict congestion the way LOS can. So I hope that when projects come before this planning commission, that we do have some consideration given to level of service, because I think that absolutely can predict congestion, especially at impacted intersections. So I just want to talk a little bit about the questions I did submit, and thank you for answering them. And I realize that they weren't really CEQA specific, because CEQA deals to me with the natural impacts on the natural environment, even though there's some, crossover to the human environment. But so often we on the Planning Commission feel handcuffed by our inability to deal with impacts, especially cumulative impacts on the human environment, whether it's air pollution. We see these incredibly detailed analysis of air pollution, but it's hard to translate that into, what is the impact of another diesel truck on an already impacted community? That's difficult for us to understand, much less implement an effective mitigation. The human environment deals with so many things, like the things I listed. Some of the things I listed were parking, crime, educational, and employment opportunities. And again, those things are always on, housing opportunities, or those things are always at the forefront of many of us planning commissioners. But it's difficult when we're just dealing with the nuts and bolts of CEQA. How do we address these issues? Because we, at least I so often feel powerless in my inability to affect positive change for the residents of Oxnard. So that's just kind of a view from 30,000 feet, and I know that that CEQA is a state thing, and so we follow what the state gives us, but so often I feel like I'm shortchanging my community by not being able to address the human environment. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I thank you. And thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak.
Chair Rejo, may I respond to two things? Thank you for these questions. Really were very, very good, and we appreciate the ability to put into thoughts a lot of the work that the team does. Two items that you raised that weren't on the list per se is, why not slide 3 in the general plan? And there's a lot of good reasons for not including that flow chart in your general plan. One, you'd be chasing your tail with the changes that the state does. Granted, they haven't changed the EIR distribution timeframe in a while, so that timeframe is pretty solid. However, we know that the state does a lot of changes frequently, so it's not recommended that that flow chart be in the general plan. In terms of, I think your other comment regarding slide 9, I think that was just more of a feedback, why, or more sharing your thoughts, and we're happy to provide a response if you need it, but I think we have really identified the why behind the change from LOS to VMT. The other issue, the third issue, which we did discuss within the memo back to you, the item 2, section 5 analysis, the first response. And we know that this is frustrating for not just the commission, it can be frustrating for the council as well. And what we're really looking at is state laws and regulations, and how do you implement them in your policies. And this is this is why I do think that the work we do and the city does is so important and impactful, is because we get to identify the state laws and we get to implement them through our policy documents that we can, where we can. And examples of that would be the policies within the general plan. And granted, it's sort of kind of out there, and it's not hard and concrete as much as you may see with the current planning work. That's very clear. 5-foot setback, 20-foot setback, lot coverage. This is a different animal. And we think it's exciting, but it also, I know, is frustrating. So part of this, too, is the state regulations and how we adopt them within our policies. Sometimes we don't have the ability to have flexibility. For example, changes in the requirements for fleet. State says you can't have gasoline-powered trucks as of X date, hard and fast. Others are a little more, how do you implement them in your land use plan or your general plan land use map? So just wanted to provide that context, if that helps.
Thank you, Ms. Mallory. Thank you, Commissioner Nash. Any others from the commission? Okay, I'll go with a couple questions. And really, thank you just on my behalf in regards to the report. I actually only have 2 post-its of questions. I actually had more, but every time I thought of something, it was answered a little bit later in the section, so I appreciate that. My first is in regards to the VMT. It appears it doesn't look like VMT is directly impacted by the number of parking spaces, but is there some indirect impact in regards to how many parking spaces are there that determines the VMT formula? And just to provide a little bit of complexity, because I can see that if there's a lot of parking spaces, that maybe people don't have to drive as much because they know that there's parking available and won't have to drive around. Or if there's not as many parking spaces, maybe they're pushed to public transportation, or they have to drive around more. So I don't know if there's something that's counterintuitive in regards to that. I have one more question, but first on that, is VMT dependent either directly or indirectly on the number of parking spaces being analyzed?
John, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, I can, Kathleen. Good question. The quick answer to that is that parking and VMT are sort of a separate issue. VMT is generated by land use, so we don't bring in parking as part of a VMT generation piece. It's whether it's a residential project, whether it might be an office, whether it might be a retail project. It's all generated by the person that wants to go to an establishment or comes from an establishment, whether it's coming from a home or going to an office building or a retail establishment. They park when they're there, but it's not the parking that generates the VMT necessarily. Now, a lack of parking can result in a couple of different things. You can have people circulating and driving a little bit more. So you were definitely correct in that assumption there. The other piece of it is if there isn't enough parking, they may choose to go to somewhere else, which may be a shorter trip than where they were going, or maybe a longer trip. Or they may decide to take a bus or walk or take some other mode. So there are a multitude of different decisions that can happen based on parking, but it's not a direct piece of the VMT calculation. It's sort of a side-related thing.
Thank you for that, sir. Thank you, Ms. Mallory. And my second question is on page 95, 20.3 methods. At the bottom, they're talking about, you know what, I'm just gonna say the 2 questions so everyone knows. It says the following questions should be considered in the analysis, whatever that analysis was. Would cumulative impact of the project in combination with the impacts of past, present, and reasonably foreseeable future projects exceed a city significance threshold? And number 2, if so, would the project's contribution to the significant cumulative impact be cumulatively considerable? I was wondering, what is the standard of... It seems more philosophical than objective, and if you could just comment on both the objective and subjective analysis that we do in trying to answer those questions.
Chair Rejo, you said page 95. Could you tell me the impact category, please?
I have section 20.3 methods, and yes, I can confirm, at least it says page 95 on my packet. Yeah, section 20.
Kathleen, this is the cumulative impacts and mandatory findings.
Thank you. Let me get to that.
And while you're looking at that, I'll just provide a little bit of context. I'm thinking a little bit more of the project. It was a little bit hotly debated. It was in regard to the port project. A lot of public comments, and maybe even in the staff analysis, public comments wanted future and possibly past projects to be cumulatively analyzed, although at least we were being told and legally, I guess by staff, that we can take in future proposed projects because they may or may not ever happen. And so we would have to analyze them in the future in regards to anything cumulatively. I just wanted to know what the standard is and what can we use, because at least from what the questions are here is that they could be cumulatively impacted the past, present, and reasonably foreseeable future projects, but then is it cumulatively considerable? So we can cumulatively analyze them, but it may not be considerable in regards to rejecting or accepting a project.
Right, Chair Arejo, so that the idea is that it's cumulatively with consideration to all the impact categories. And that's the intent with that question. I can't speak to the port project. Maybe Joe, would you like to add something?
I can let you finish, but I was just going to add something once you were done.
So, and I didn't know if Heather wanted to provide any other additional context to that. That would be no. Oh, sorry.
No.
So I guess just to add to that, so when we do perform our CEQA analysis, we do look at our current project list. So that list includes all projects that have been submitted at that time. So those projects are considered, and those are what we would consider to be reasonably foreseeable. Our projects that are either approved and under construction, approved or pending, meaning that we have an active submitted application. I believe during that prior project, there was references to a project which had not been submitted or even discussed with the city at that point in time. So that was something that was not considered to be reasonably foreseeable because, again, we hadn't actually received anything related to that project.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Thank you, Ms. Mallory. Did you want to say something else or no?
No,
Okay.
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I realized I should have done this last question after my first one. In regards to any federal grants that Oxnard may or may not receive, or from the county, is our going to VMT going to affect that? No, I'll scratch out county. Is anything related to the federal using level of service? Or, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Chair Arejo and John, if you want to be ready to chime in, I'm not sure if you know off the top of your head. So any federal environmental analysis would be in accordance with the National Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA. So I'm actually not familiar, John, if what's the equivalent in the federal NEPA document?
I still believe they're using level of service or a variant of, if it's a NEPA document.
Thank you. So does this mean that it is prudent for the city to still continue level of service in regards to projects, as they may or may not impact federal grants that a project or an organization that has that project will receive?
Chair Arejo, when we know that a project, or we anticipate that a project might be using federal funds, we'll do a layered document. So we think of that ahead of time. Those issues have come up.
Thank you, Ms. Mallory. And Mr. Pearson, has any of those projects happened in the past 3 years? Because I can't remember one. I just want to get an example.
So I'd say rarely does it end up coming back before the Planning Commission. So a lot of times, at least recently, it has to do with some of like our affordable housing projects where they end up getting like federal funding. So as a result, they have to do a level of NEPA analysis. So it may not be like a full environmental impact statement, which is basically the NEPA version of EIR, it might still fall into an exemption category. So those projects we have had a level of NEPA review, but again, not to the extent of having to do like a full traffic analysis for them. But there may be other projects that the city has processed related to that. But the ones I'm most familiar with are the like affordable housing ones where they end up getting federal funding.
Chair Rayo, another example would be a transportation-related project that would be carried out through Public Works. We see that oftentimes they'll do the layered document, and also that was considered when we were working on the Ormond Beach project, which we are still working on, and we had to look at what type of environmental document would be needed for that project, and we considered the federal and state one.
Thank you. And my last question is, I saw the sections, I know that energy was pulled out of utilities. Are there any sections there that Oxnard optionally puts that are not mandated? I know sometimes in some documents, it's up to the jurisdiction to have, there's mandated ones and optional ones. I'm just curious. I didn't see any that were listed as optional.
Chair Rejo, we follow the state's guidance. This matches the state's checklist.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mallory. And I think that's all the questions I have, at least for this round. I'll look to the commission if they have any other questions at this time. Seeing none, and I have none myself, I would just like to offer our thanks in regards to the report, and we very much look forward to approving, the formal resolution to the city on November 7th. So, and before we get out of this agenda section, since it's coming back before us for our formal approval to go to the city council, I recommend, not mandate, that we get any comments or questions like Commissioner Nash was able to do in advance by, let's say, the 24th. So if you're a little bit late over the weekend, at least Ms. Mallory and her team can see it by the 28th. So that gives us a week and gives her and her team at least 10 days.
Chair, if I may, I don't recall you opening up for a potential public comment before the item.
And you are certainly correct on that. Thank you very much. It's been a while since we had a study session. I apologize to the public and to commission, and now I'll go to Madam Secretary if we have any public comment, either here in person or on Zoom land.
No, Chair, no comments.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. I'll close the public comment. My other comments still stand. I'll look to any last by-the-way comments before we head into the next section. Thank you very much, Commission. Thank you very much, Ms. Mallory, and all of your team. Look forward to sending you our questions and comments in the next week. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. We'll move on to Section H, Planning Commission business. Is there any business to report from the Planning Commission? Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll raise an issue that I raised when I first came onto the Planning Commission in 2011. Would it be possible for the city to provide its planning commissioners with a laptop that we could have with us at our Planning Commission meetings, and they could be loaded with the agenda? I don't know what happened this go around, but I couldn't find my agenda packet that normally comes by special delivery or the mail. So it would have been helpful to have a digital copy in front of me tonight, even though I read everything online or scanned everything online. So I just wanted to raise this issue, and I know we have a city councilman in attendance, so maybe he's listening also. So thank you for that. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Nash. Any others from the commission? I have a couple comments. So I'd like to just do a little classroom session in regards to when we went to a quasi-committee of the whole. So there are 3 ways, other than the regular way, that the commission can talk about. Usually I use the word deliberate. We have our regular, so when a motion comes before us, the default is twice per motion for 10 minutes each. We rarely go to 10 minutes, but that's the default. When the chair, and at least in the past, has seen that it's better and probably more fruitful to go into a more flexible type of deliberation, so it's usually a motion on the other assemblies, although on this commission I've suggested and asked for if there's any objections. We've gone through informal consideration that was done by past chair Daniel Chavez and Commissioner Conley on the subcommittee for bylaws, in which it was kind of like a conversation, and usually that's done with very few people. It could even be done here, but we have a little bit more formal standards in regards to what's required of us on the city and state level. We've done the committee of the whole, in which Commissioner Nash, in regards to the port project, was the chair pro tem, if you will, and he guided a conversation to get to a majority decision that was brought up back to the regular session, and which I remember then making a formal amendment because I didn't think it would pass in informal consideration, and that was done and passed as like that. And for this one, I did the quasi committee of the whole because I felt that I was best suited in regards to chairing and guiding that discussion. And so it worked almost like the committee of the whole, except I was the one chairing it. I could have moved into declaring a blank in regards to the date, but I felt that there were multiple suggestions from multiple people and even from single, myself included, and so I wanted a more informal consideration in regards to the dates, move it into formal, and then we could have amended it from there, and I think that was the best way. So those are a lot of your options. There's a lot that we can do. Technically, if there's no objections and it falls within the guidelines of the city and the state, we can do anything that we would like. Obviously within the guidelines. So hopefully that's not going to be clipped out of context. I regret just saying that just out of there. So hopefully my comments can be made in context. And then I just like to state in general that some of our meetings can be contentious. They can be long. At least for myself and Commissioner Dr. Lopez, and I believe Commissioner Nash might have been on the end of it, is that sometimes we have no meetings or 4 meetings in a month, especially that was happening with the cannabis motions, which I wasn't participating in, but that really goes to all the commissioners who really spent that time, and we've never had to go past midnight. And that's nothing to say that, Chair Chavez was great in regards to all of those meetings, in regards to the multiple items that we've had. Staff has been great in able to scheduling 1 or 2, maybe 3 if they've been small for us, so that we've usually been able to get out by 9 p.m., if not even 7 p.m. So we appreciate the staff in regards to scheduling that. I just state this because I just want to acknowledge the different knowledge bases and experiences that we all have. And I felt that they may have been unfairly questioned. We have a variety of life experiences when we come here, and it's good that we were drawn to one set of criteria that we're looking at, because we're a commission, we have a variety of opinions. I really appreciate, one of my favorite is when I go to my parliamentary organizations, that we're able to vote against the idea, but we're not voting against the person. And so I believe that, especially when there's public comment, which we love, that one I've actually gotten, the reason I did that 1 million bond on the port was because of a Ventura Audubon something society had that suggestion, and so I suggested it. Opinions have been changed on this dais because of public comment, and even in between meetings of the same commissioner. And so, public comment is hopefully will always be productive, and sometimes they may not be productive. But as the chair, I really appreciate all the opinions that you all give. It's really hard. In my opinion, I think Oxnard Planning Commission has a lot of projects that they deal with. more than I want to say any other city. That's arguable, so I can't guarantee that. And so I really appreciate everyone's time. And especially with the appointments of 4 of us coming up, there might be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 commissioners not going to be here for a variety of reasons. And so hopefully whatever meetings we have in the future, that will be able to be productive for the benefit of our city that we love. Thank you very much. We'll go into updates from the community development staff. Mr. Pearson.
Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair and Commissioners. Not much, and other than just noting that our next meeting is scheduled for November 7th. And at this time, we have the CEQA guidelines as previously discussed today, as well as 1 potential wireless facility.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. And Mr. Zaragoza, I don't know if everyone has been introduced to you. If you could just say hey.
Yeah, Deputy City Attorney Jason Zaragoza. So I advise a number of departments and have started assisting, excuse me, Ken with planning as well.
Thank you, Mr. Zaragoza. And if there's nothing else from staff, and if there's no further business, the meeting will be adjourned if there is no objection. Seeing and hearing none, the meeting is adjourned at 8:19 p.m. Thank you all and good night.